love being outside. And as we all know, adventures outside are really different in the big city than they are in the brave wilderness. When I lived in the big city, I'd spend a lot of time out on my balcony. And I even strung up a hammock from one side of the balcony to the other. And I loved falling asleep and watching the smoggy city sky with the 1 or 2 stars that would shine their little faces down on me. One night I woke up just before sunrise, and there, inching along the edge of the railing of my balcony, was a raccoon. Now, raccoons are cute, but a little bit ferocious. So I said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Raccoon." And the raccoon said, I got out of that hammock so fast. I'm Nicole, I'm from Arts Place, and this is your storytelling video. And today's storytelling tip is honor your own adventures. Now, every life has adventures in it. In the city, in the outdoors, in the grocery store, golly, we have lots of different events in our life that could be called an adventure. To me, an adventure is a moment of not knowing or bravery or curiosity that surprises you and leads you into a new path, a new direction. In the case of my story with the hammock, it led me running as fast as I could inside. I love being outside, and one of my favorite things to do is to take my knapsack and my tent and to walk for days and days through the nature. Now, one such path that I followed through the nature was in a country called Turkey. I'd really done my best to do my homework. I had a guidebook and I had read it cover to cover. I had researched online, and upon arrival in Turkey, I talked to lots of local people to find out just what might be lurking in those mountain forests. And one local friend told me this. He said, "You know, there are wild spiky boar that live in those mountain forests." "Uh-huh," I said. "Wild spiky boar, those are like pigs that run wild in the forest, and they've got tusks and spikes along their back." "Yeah," he said, "and they're mostly harmless. It's really fine, you can avoid them, but know this, if you see a group of small ones, there's always a large one lurking somewhere nearby." I hiked for several days through the mountains of Turkey, and one day I was making particularly great time. I'd already summited a mountain that day, albeit a short one, and I'd even had a nap in the afternoon in the beautiful sunlight, and just as it was coming on early evening, I came into a beautiful mountain clearing. It was covered with rocks and shale, with forest on all sides, and as I stepped into that clearing, a chill ran down my spine. I don't know why, but I just got a totally creepy feeling in that place, and I just thought, oh, I'm so glad that there's still several more hours of daylight and that I can keep hiking and I don't have to camp here tonight. So I crossed the clearing and I looked for the trail marker in the forest on the other side to continue on my way, but I couldn't find the trail marker. So I thought, well, maybe it's just not quite at this spot on the other side of the clearing. And so I started to walk to the left and I started to walk to the right, and I ended up walking all the way around the clearing. It was a very big clearing. It took me a couple of hours, and nowhere did I see the continuation of the path. I was lost. Now, I wasn't too concerned about being lost because I did know the way back, so I could always turn around and walk back the other way to the next village or the next road, but I didn't want to. I wanted to continue along the path, and I wanted to follow my guidebook to the other side of the mountains. Now, my guidebook was no help at all. My guidebook was filled with directions like, "Turn right at the second rock on the path." Now, we were on a mountain, so, there were a lot of rocks. Not helpful at all. And after all of that walking and all of that searching, I thought to myself, it's getting dark. I think I have to set up camp. And so I chose a spot on some flat rocks right in the middle of that clearing, and I started to set up my tent. And it was then that I saw them. Off into the forest, there was a group of small wild spiky boar. Now, by small, I mean like person-sized or big dog-sized. And they looked at me, and I looked back at them. And I was like, "Hey guys, I'm Nicole. I'm gonna camp here for the night. Is that cool? Yeah? Great. Maybe you could hang out in the forest for the evening. That would be awesome." Cheers, guys. And I started to set up my tent. And as the sun set behind the mountains, I curled up inside my sleeping bag. But as soon as it was dark, I heard them. Click, clack, click, click, clack, clack. I could hear the sound of their hooves clicking and clacking across the mountain shale. Click, clack, click, click, clack. They were coming from the edge of the forest across the clearing, closer and closer to my tent. Click, clack, click, clack, clack, clack. There were a lot of them. I'd only seen about 2 or 3 in the dusk light. There had to be 4, 5, 6, 7. I didn't know how many there were. Click, clack, click, click, clack. They were all around my tent. And then, all of a sudden, click, 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 one of them broke into a run. And in that moment, a lot of thoughts moved through my head. I remembered that I'd spent a bunch of time as a young person in black bear country in northern Ontario in Canada, and I knew that for black bears in particular, not the same as all other animals, with black bears, sometimes it works to make yourself big or to make a loud noise, just let them know that you're there. So in that moment, as I heard the sound of the hooves running, I did one thing. I took a deep breath in, and with all of the power in the very middle of my gut, I yelled, "Ha!" And that apparently is the wrong thing to say to a wild spiky boar in the forests on the mountains in Turkey. The reply I received was this. I heard in the dark a deep breath in. And then the lowest, most sinister growl you could ever imagine, seeping through the dark and into my tent and accosting my ears. And then another deep breath in. And then again, that horrible, horrible growl sound. And I thought about the advice my local friend had given me. If you see a few small, wild spiky boar, there's always a big one nearby. Huh. Well, in my tent, I thought, well, what can I do? What do I have to protect myself? Now, I didn't actually have any bear spray because I wasn't traveling through bear country, but I did have insect repellent. I thought, and I grabbed that and I put that in one hand. And I did have my hiking poles, and I grabbed a hiking pole and I put that in my other hand. And I had an orange shiny whistle, and I grabbed that and I clenched it beneath my teeth, and I took a deep breath in. But I couldn't bring myself to breathe out because, my first dialogue with the wild boar hadn't gone very well. And so there I sat, quiet and still and tense in my tent, bug spray, hiker pole, whistle between my teeth. And the very big wild spiky boar kept growling and stalking around my tent. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, deep breath in, growl. Deep breath in, growl. All night long, it stalked my tent, first on one side, then the other side. All night long, I could hear the clicking and clacking of its hooves. Sometimes it would move closer to the forest and be still and quiet for a short time, and then it would always, always find its way back. At one point, when it was over by the forest, I did in fact fall asleep just for a few minutes. And while I was asleep, I had a dream. And I dreamt that a little dog came padding up to me. And at first it was all tail a-wagging, tongue a-sticking out. But then it started to growl and snarl. There were other people in my dream, and I asked them, I said, "What should we do about this dog? I think this dog is dangerous. What do we do about the dangerous dog?" And I woke up from my nightmare and I was like, oh, thank goodness, it's just a dream. And then I heard the real growl outside of my tent, and it was no dog, and there were no other people around to help. In that moment, though, I realized that my whistle and my bug spray and my hiking pole would not help me. That in fact, there wasn't a whole lot that could help me in that moment, except to be still and calm and patient. And I realized that I'd made a mistake. I had wandered into this wild boar territory, and I had started a cranky, nasty fight with them by starting by yelling first. It was me that started this argument, and I felt sorry. And as I lay there in my tent, I talked in my mind to the giant wild spiky boar, and I tried to offer it respect and to let it know that I meant no harm and that I would move on in the morning. It was a very long night. When dawn came, all the wild boar clickety-clacked their way back into the forests, far, far away to find a cozy place to sleep during the day, while I shook off that sleepless night and poked my little head outside of my tent. I heaved a big sigh of relief, and I felt grateful. Grateful to be alive, grateful to be safe, and grateful to that growly, giant, wild, spiky boar for all of the lessons it had taught me. I packed up my tent, and I was still lost. You might remember I'd entered that big clearing and I'd walked all the way around without finding a path marker. But in fact, what I'd missed when I first walked into the clearing was that the path veered off and to the left. And with a few more searches, I did find my way, and I did continue that path for several more days safely to the end of my journey. But what an adventure.